Good morning, everybody. Actually, good afternoon, everybody. It's a few seconds before 1 o'clock. We're just waiting for the final people to rock and roll and join us, and then we're going to get underway. Hopefully, a fairly useful webinar this morning. It's part of a series of webinars we've been doing, part of our book launch of Resilience Unraveled, a new set of podcasts, etc., and as a result of a blog we wrote last week around the Brexit effect. So we thought we'd put this webinar together to give you a bit of an overview of one or two tools that can help you or help you with others. And hopefully this will have some value. If you're live, there's a chat room underneath this video player, and you can join in. I'll be there, and a couple of my colleagues perhaps. You can ask anything you want. Obviously, if you're on the replay, you won't be able to see that. So, any questions you want to ask, please post via the web role. If there's anything else that you want to ask which is more significant or going to take more time, then just email us, russell@qedod.com or info@qedod.com will also work. Okay, I think we're ready to go. So good morning, everybody. It's 1 o'clock. This is the plan for today. We're going to look at performance, resilience and the Brexit effect. And my name is Russell Thackeray. We're going to talk a little bit about some things we've covered in other webinars just to make sure the context is correct, a few tools, some ideas about some next steps, and if there's any questions come through I'll deal with them straight away. Otherwise we'll get on and make things start to work. Okay, it's always a good idea just to make sure that you know that we're specialists in this idea of personal resilience. We're an OD consultancy firm, but we look at resilience and evaluation in particular. And resilience for us is important because it's all about change. And for us, resilience isn't just a sort of nice to have in HR about health and well-being. It's really about performance. And we focus on giving you and creating tools and resources offline and online, creating workshops and ongoing coaching. And it's important for us to make sure that anything to do with resilience is practical and affects you in the day-to-day, because we think it's one of the most important skills you can have. In fact, one of my colleagues used to call it the most important skill for the 21st century. And she was an expert, so she must have known. A bit about me: I used to be a professional musician, so I understood a lot about performance resilience. In my world, if you are off, you were sacked. So it was one of those things that focused the mind and made you look after yourself. I worked in marketing and became a CEO, and then went into the sort of psychological world and finally into training and this idea of emotional intelligence, mental toughness, and the psychology of performance. And I've been fascinated with it ever since, both the production of performance, the measurement, and the evaluation of that performance. So I'm really excited by resilience because I think it brings together in an appropriate and modern way some of the techniques that have existed in psychology for a while. And it sort of makes it more acceptable for certain communities. So first of all, what is it? Well, the traditional definition is your ability to bounce back. In fact, I think the term bounce back ability has been created and accepted in the dictionaries. But for me, that's only part of the story. Resilience is also about dealing with pressure and stress in the moment and still performing. And in order to do that, we have to recognize the gear change when our resilience is being compromised, and therefore we have to build the capacity. And so the work we do here, personal resilience, QED personal resilience, is to look at those four areas. There's lots of stuff which is a zero-sum game, which is about fixing you when you go wrong. But I also think it's about sometimes making sure that you don't go wrong in the first place. There's loads and loads and loads of results, right from the earliest thinking and positive psychology about resilience through to the Army, American Army, British Army. There's so much information now that resilience works and adds value, that this sort of we don't need to basically worry too much about that. And in HR terms, of course, we have value at both micro and macro levels. And as we said, health and well-being is definitely a key thing. Change, of course, is where there's a big market for resilience thinking and training and development. And at the most tactical level, it's about helping you achieve your KPIs and your individual productivity. So that's what we're all about. So let's get started. And we all know that last week it was a bit of a week, some people said. Chris Evans resigned from Top Gear. The England manager, the England team, good Lord. and of course the whole Brexit thing. And I was very struck recently when I was working with a bunch of people, how many people were going through the Kubler-Ross change curve, the real grief. And some people were exhibiting those signs of being stuck as well, which I thought was quite interesting. So I saw people who, and I felt it myself on the Friday morning after the vote, their absolute shock of, goodness gracious, this is what we've actually decided. It's, and the phrase "I didn't see that coming" was something I heard many, many times. And we'll hear people who are very angry about it, who are resentful against the people who have voted. There's lots of name calling. All you have to do is go on Facebook and see the absolute vitriol that's been posted in all sorts of directions. But the key is, of course, that what it has created is this uncertainty. And often the way we deal with uncertainty is to be cautious, but not everybody is. And so the point of resilience is about how you spot the opportunities, how you do things to move forward, rather than how to sit back and avoid making a mistake. Because in life, what you do usually works out, assuming you have a plan that's linked to a sort of a tangible goal. So more of that later. We put together a blog at the time and worked through a few tips around managing yourself, making sure that you know you're going through the change curve, letting people know it's okay to go through that change curve. I think if you're leading or managing someone, you see someone beating themselves up and they're really angry about stuff, don't join in, don't argue, don't tell them they're wrong. Let people go through that change curve and they go through at their own rate. I was talking to someone the other day who was basically sitting there saying, my family is ruined, the future for my children has been robbed because of this vote. And let them talk it through. Just let them say stuff. They've got to then focus on doing work, and that's the problem. We become interested in the argument sometimes than interested in making sure that people are actually performing. And sometimes the best thing you can do if you're looking after your own resilience is just to avoid these toxic people, and particular toxic people in the media. It's the thing for me to avoid the television and avoid social media in particular when stuff like this is going on, because all you have is opinion dressed up as fact. All you have is vitriol. We have people who are saying, well, maybe it won't happen after all, complete denial about the whole thing. And what you want to do is start focusing on yourself and your own future. So this is an opportunity in a way to review your finances, review your future. Where do you want to go? Because there's absolutely one thing that's true. In uncertainty, there's opportunity as well as threat. And actually, markets create more wealth during times of great change than they do during periods of when the market's very flat. So you can see all this hoo-ha as a chance for you to think about the future and make change, make positive change. It's a time to really get a grip of yourself and make some change and move forward. It's interesting how many people who are cash rich can acquire small items through to large properties, because this is the sort of market where prices go flat. So whilst there are losers of any market, there are also winners. And whilst I don't like the win-lose analogy, it is a feature of those people who go into meltdown versus those people who actually seize the initiative and do stuff. You also have to deal with your anxiety, because people do get anxious. We'll talk about this later on. And it is key that we do stuff. Sometimes it doesn't matter what it is, just do stuff rather than sit and live in your own head and fret, because that's not going to help you in the longer term. So if you see people at work who are doing these things, you can help them as well. Point in the direction of the blog by all means, but don't argue with them. And lead by example. Next time someone says, oh, it's going to be terrible, you say, yes, but. Oh, it's going to be terrible, yes, and. Yeah, that is terrible, yes, but things are not going to stay the same. So what we have to do is get a grip and start to move yourself on. And what we have to remember is this idea of confirmation bias. This is something, if you're interested in the work of Daniel Kahneman, from Thinking Fast, Thinking Slow. He came up or pulled together these ideas of biases that we have. And confirmation bias is a really interesting one that is at the heart of some of our resilience issues and opportunities, which is anything we believe, we tend to find the evidence to support. So if you think it's going to be terrible, you'll find the evidence to back up your idea or your view. And you think it's going to be great, the same applies. So remember confirmation bias. It works for us as well as working against us. So you can read more about the blog on our website, qedod.com/blogs. let's have a look at our big idea. So our big idea is about looking at these things. Resilience for us is about taking your human potential, represented by those 4 inner boxes, and putting them or focusing them through this idea of our ropes toolkit. Remembering that performance isn't just about resilience, it's about competence as well. You can be the fittest person, always turn out ready to rock, ready to go, but if you don't have the actual basic skills to do the job, your performance will be affected. But if you have a high degree of skill and high degree of expertise, but very low resilience, your performance will also be affected. So it's worth bearing in mind that it's about the balance of these two things. Don't just think because you sleep better, you're going to be a better performer at work. But if you sleep worse, however your skill set, your performance might be affected. So let's just break this down a little bit. Regulation is all about your self-awareness and your capacity to manage yourself. Know yourself, recognize where you're going, recognize your own confirmation biases, have a think about those and start playing with the idea. Understand that regulation is about your own choices in the world, and if you choose to see the world as a negative, horrible place, it'll be that. So you decide. Optimism is as it says. Now, optimism is the purposeful thinking forward in an optimistic way. It's not sort of happy clappy, it's all going to be fab, or the sort of old stereotypical American positive thinking idea, because that just raises false expectations. Optimism is about managing our expectations for the future, managing our confirmation bias, and attributing the right causes and the right inputs to where our performance is good and poor. We're going to focus much more on this in forthcoming podcasts. Purpose is about knowing where you're going. If today seems horrible, but you know where you're going, you can actually make more sense of today. Again, a couple of tools for that today. Energy, less on that this time, except for sleep. But if you've got the right amount of energy to fund your resilience, then you'll have enough resilience to cope with whatever life throws at you. And strangely enough, resilience is a lot about stamina. It's about your grit, it's your determination, your ability to face the world in a stoic sort of way. Just to sometimes, as the Stoics say, get over yourself and get on with it. So let's have a look at some factors which build your capacity for resilience. And often this first thing is the thing that is most affected when we become anxious, and that's sleep. It seems odd to say that. We should be talking about the benefits of sleep, but there's a lot of macho behaviour that goes on out there. I was listening to a podcast recently when someone was saying you need 7 or 8 hours sleep a night, and the person who's a highly regarded entrepreneur was saying, I get through at 4. And the person who'd written the book, Joanna Huffington, you'll know from the Huffington Post, written an interesting book about sleep, said, I used to exist on floor 4 hours sleep until I burnt myself out. And it's when you undersleep and pretend to undersleep, you're robbing your brain and body's ability to regenerate and build its own resilience. So there's physical and mental benefits for sleep, and all of these things are good. And if nothing else, anything that helps you prevent cancer is a good idea. I'll do that picture as well. Where that came from. Anyway, some tips for improving sleep. And one of the big things to realise in sleep is this idea that the key is a bedtime routine, and you need to have a routine that allows you to have the amount of sleep you need. If you actually need 8 hours sleep a night and you have to get up at 6, it's no surprise to think that you have to go to bed at the equivalent time. It's no point going to bed at 2 if you need 8 hours sleep and you've got to get up at 6. You've got to be able to adjust your going to bed times, which means if you have a proper routine, your brain recognises the fact that you're going into a routine before sleep. Now, people get very excited about this idea of blue light, and so, should you listen to a podcast if you want, and if that's part of your routine, but don't listen to something exciting. I think I have a couple of podcasts I listen to which are almost guaranteed to get me off to sleep. Something about the drone of certain voices on a couple of specific podcasts I listen to help. But we'd also know that looking at blue light, reading social media, wakes your brain up. Not because it's exciting, it's just because the blue light stimulates the brain. And know your own circadian rhythm. And that changes, of course, depending on where you are in the world. And for example, we know the effects of a circadian rhythm that's been upset when you have jet lag. So you have to understand where you are in the world, whether you're a morning or an evening person. People think things like Jawbone Up and other technology, Fitbit and so on, are useful in order to monitor whether you actually are asleep. A lot of people think they're awake all night, but they've actually been asleep, so that can be useful. So as I said, get yourself a bedroom routine, whether that's a hot bath or a milk or a drink or something, whatever it might be, not alcohol obviously, but just sort yourselves out a routine and then stick to it. Because the thing with a routine is to stick to it, and you don't have to think about it anymore. And then your brain knows that at the beginning of that routine, you're on the sort of path to sleep. It's a bit like putting kids to bed at night. We don't just say, in the middle of a screaming temper tantrum or them being busy, they just hoy them in the cot. What you have to do is actually put them through a routine, read them a bedtime story, blah, blah, blah. So we know it works. Assuming you've got kids asleep at night. One of mine never did. Anyway. Have a look around your room, get rid of the TV. Don't watch the TV. Don't have that sort of light on in your room. Decide what you're going to eat and drink during the evening. They say drink less caffeine in the evenings. I know people that swear by it and people that hate it. And we know that's caffeine raises your cortisol levels, so it's probably best not to have be too late in the evening. You can do all sorts of visualization techniques, thinking of round numbers, thinking of numbers and counting down from 100, counting down in a series of round numbers, just not difficult things, but just literally in your mind counting backwards. Have a think, create a story that you always think about when you go to bed. And also by the side of your bed, have a pen and paper. If you wake up in the middle of the night with stuff in your head, don't switch your iPad on to make a link, or an iPad or something, or another piece of technology. Use a pen and paper, scribble down what you're thinking. Your brain enjoys doing something. And then, of course, during the day, make sure that you get as much exercise as you need. And if you need to power nap, have a power nap. No more than 20 minutes. But the key thing is to get that routine going. Now, the killer for sleep is anxiety. And anxiety is really about the fear of the unknown. And it's one of the big sort of emotional triggers that creates a lot of problem with resilience. And people can actually have what we call an anxiety disorder at the most extreme point of this continuum. Now, the thing about anxiety is there to protect us. It's there to make us cautious. It heightens our awareness. It strengthens our potential emotional reaction to things. And therefore, the enemy of this is to be able to use your prefrontal cortex, so your thinking centers, and your doing centers more in order to counter the negative effects of anxiety. So the whole point of anxiety is your fear of the unknown. You don't know what's coming. So what happens is you tend to worry about things. And the problem is you have to turn the worries into problem solves. So let's say you make a mistake and you're frightened about what will happen. It makes sense to do a risk analysis and work out the various scenarios, and then you're ready because you've turned your mind away from worrying about something, churning it around in your head, worrying at it like a bone, and actually thinking, right, and so what would I do? So this idea, well, what if this happened? What if that happened? Well, what if it does? What if it doesn't? So what would you do? What would come afterwards? And someone said to me once, don't kid yourself that worry is always helpful. Sometimes it's not. And actually worry is sometimes just a sign of ill-disciplined thinking. Now, at a more extreme level, of course, that's much worse than that. But sometimes people just worry for the sake of it. And actually, there's a phrase, my ex-person, ex-friend, colleague, whatever, isn't happy unless they're worrying. If they don't have anything to worry about, they worry about that. And that is just a lack of rigor in thinking. Okay, so risk assess, create action. One technique I use is very useful is to say, well, actually, at 6 o'clock today, in the evening, whatever, I'm going to spend 20 minutes worrying. And it's actually quite interesting when you get to it, how hard it is just to worry on command. Worry comes from these unexpressed thoughts, which are sort of lurking around your system, almost like the spare capacity in your brain that sort of wanders off. Instead of fantasizing and daydreaming about something nice, it fantasizes and daydreams to create something you should worry about. So let the worries surface to the top of your head and then deal with them. Exercise is great. Exercise to move your brain and also to move your body. And using the exercise time, using the worry time, means that you're managing yourself better. And as I say, change what if to how can I. Again, make sure you're sleeping. The more you worry, the more you lose sleep, the more you'll worry, because the more you lose the capacity to manage that mental state. So staying in the moment, doing stuff is the key. And breathing is a particularly important thing here. There's lots of, I was amazed the other day in Waterstones or other good bookshops around there, I suppose, how many books there were on health and fitness, and then how many books there were on mindfulness. I think there's more on mindfulness and health and fitness at the moment. So we're going to spend time in another webcast or webinar looking at breathing, but have a look at diaphragmatic breathing. It's the key really to help you to get a grip of your mental state sometimes. And you can use things like heart math apps and such like to help you. You also focus on the future. A little tool we use, look back, have a think of your life. Look at the patterns in your life. Look at the times when you're at your best. When you were really flying and you're thoroughly enjoying life. Well, look at what was going on. What was happening? How did it feel? What was actually going on at that point? How were you? What were you doing? Where? And just sort of look at the peaks and troughs and start to look for your patterns. And it is quite interesting as you look back. I mean, the older you are, the easier it is to look back further. If you're 17, 18, it's quite hard to look back that far. But just you will start to see patterns occurring. And it is quite interesting when you see the fact that you'll tend to have more resilience when you're at the top of one of your peaks. And the reverse is true. And obviously then start by thinking about this. Write a list of everything you want to do, experience and be in your life. Not necessarily have, because the having of something is different from the being or doing of things. And it helps you create a nice long list of all the things you want to do. And wouldn't it be great then, all the things you want to experience and be. Imagine if you could plan that into your life and then just live that life around everything you wanted to do and have. Do and be. That'd be great, wouldn't it? So a second technique therefore is to take those big long lists and exercise you work from. We'll be putting fact sheets together around these on the website in due course. And then you basically look at you at the end of your life and work backwards from there in 10-year increments and think about, well, where do I want to be career-wise, health and fitness-wise, relationships-wise, family and friends-wise, achievements-wise, activities-wise, finances-wise. And then you can actually have an interesting conversation with yourself that says, well, I wanted to be and do all these different things, but I also want to be here in these areas. So where are my trade-offs? How can I make these things work for me? And the ability to grasp your future is quite interesting because people often have quite a short-term view of their careers. And if you think, for example, of an athlete or a sports person or a professional musician or something, or even someone who's been on a fast-track graduate program or whatever it might be, they can actually reach their goals quite quickly sometimes. And then what? And then exercises like this allow you to think, well, what's next? So I remember once having done this exercise many, many years ago, waking up one day and being really quite happy, not understanding why, because there were other things going on that would meant I shouldn't be happy, and suddenly realising that I was living the life I'd destined for myself. Not in its entirety, not exactly, but pretty well as I wanted. And within a couple of years, I experienced, sort of signs of real burnout. It was because my career was no longer working for me. I'd lived past through those goals. I had no sense of where I was going. So resilient people know where they're going. They know what they want, and they also know what they don't want, and they plan accordingly. And then they spend their time focusing on the things which are the least effort, which pay off the highest. Now, sometimes work means that effort has to be high, but it should never be high effort with low payoff, because that's just the grind. So what we're looking for sometimes, and this idea of flow comes from this idea that we work hard at something, it pays off well, it gives us a good return, either spiritually, morally, emotionally, welfare-wise, whatever it might be. But also it takes resources, it takes our intellectual effort to get there. And flow is all about performing at a level which you're getting a good reward back from, but it means you have to concentrate, you have to be in the moment, you have to really get to grips with things. Now I know there's lots of time management things around prioritization, urgent and important and all that sort of stuff, but I like this one because I think it helps you really decide, where do I put my focus? Where do I put my focus around my goals? And where do I put my focus around the tasks that it takes? And I think that's quite useful. And the final tool that many of you have seen before is the old circles of control, which is very good for stress. Figuring out, writing down all the things that are bothering you, writing down all the things that are worrying you or causing you anxiety. And if there's nothing, well, absolutely fine. You don't need to worry so much about this. But if you feel stressed, you might still have to do it. Write down everything you're up to at the moment. And then figure out where to put these things. And either these tasks will fit into the circle of control, which is where you have direct influence over them. Sorry, a direct activity to do these things, so you can completely control them. The circle of influence, where you cannot directly control these things, but you can have some form of influence. And the circle of control, the circle of concern, can't read my own writing here, the circle of concern is on the outer ring where you have the least capacity to be able to fix things, but often we worry about them. So the circle of control, the strategy for that is get on, do them. And now what's interesting when you watch people who are stressed is they're often worrying about things that are going on the outside area. But they can't affect these things, but they're going to worry about them. Oh, but this, oh, but that, and then we're back into the anxiety phase. And actually, certainly one of the jobs of a leader or a manager is to help people focus and guide and coach people who are focusing too much in areas of the circle of concern. Because normally when they're there, of course, they're not doing the things which are in the circle of control, which means they're not being effective and efficient. They're just being dramatic or stressed, and that can be a problem. So strategy for the middle is get on and do it. Strategy for the outside is stop doing that. Now you can't just stop doing something without doing something else. So you have to replace everything from the outside ring to the inside ring. And the middle one, if you're going to influence something, well, actually, you can only influence the bits which are in your circle of control. So the middle section, the green one on my colour palette here, is about doing what you need to do and then moving the rest of it into the circle of concern. If you need to have a conversation about your boss because they're going to do something that you can't do, you have the conversation and then you let it go and concentrate on something else. Your brain works brilliantly by stopping doing something, by starting to do something else. It doesn't just stop and then go into park. You always have to be occupying your brain. So hopefully there's a few tools and techniques for you there. We've written a bit of an introduction, Claire and I, around this concept of resilience unravelled. It's a free ebook. Concentrate with it. It gets better as it goes along, and it's got some really good tools and techniques. You can give it away. You can use it. It's free. You just go to our website qedod.com and click on the links, and it'll take you there. I can see there's been activity in the chat room below. So there's one question there I see. What should I start with first? Well, I'd start with recognizing your confirmation bias. Recognize that what you do and think has a direct correlation with what your future will be. So please bear that in mind. So hopefully you found some use in that today. We want to make our podcasts, which are on iTunes and other sources of podcast serving, our books and our blogs as relevant as useful. If you've got ideas that you think you'd like us to cover, please write in, email, or leave a commentary, whatever you like. That would be great. Always interested to hear from you. But that's all for today. There will be another podcast coming soon. Please join us then, and thank you all for those of you who've been contributing as we've gone along. Thank you.